Good morning. My name's Toby McAdam. I'm an herbalist with Risingsun Iodine Products. And some of you have contacted me, asked me regarding, as an herbalist, how would I know anything about the, viruses? Because I've talked about the virus and what I've explained what was going to happen in February is exactly what this virus has done. So let me give you a little bit of history. Before I became an herbalist, back in my younger days, which is in late 80s, I left Montana. I was an optician. I went out to Minnesota and went to work at a company. And then I also got involved with a research facility out there. And it was actually viruses and bacteria because genetics and DNA was always been an interest of mine. When I was back there, started working with viruses, and one of them happened to be called the coronavirus. Now, you probably have been given misinformation or it's been presented inaccurately. The coronavirus was actually let's say, characterized. It's not discovered. It was actually, they call it characterized when they diagram the virus. It was in 1960s. It affected what they call the upper and lower tracts, respiratory tracts. So it's been around for quite a few years. There's been various versions of it. And the reason they call a coronavirus is this right here is the best way to explain it. You see these red cones? Those are called cones, and that's where that's where the virus was derived from. Inside this is a structure, and it's made up of what they call DNA or RNA. Now, RNA is kind of unique. In viruses, there is what they call RNA and DNA. In the coronavirus strand, it is called RNA. It's single strand. Let me get a little bit more detail. This is what they call the double strand is a DNA. Okay. The single strand is called RNA. That's the simplicity. So that's what the difference is. There's some others that can go in technical, but you want to, as a common everyday person, you don't care about, you just want to know what's going on, because this whole incident, the whole thing going on right now is panicking people. So I want you to understand how this has been around. This virus has been around for a long time. The number of people infected, what they're going to find is going to be a lot more than what they actually have recorded. If this virus has been around since the 60s, people have had it. And here's why there's a difference between DNA. RNA is actually the common cold. Unstable, they change. DNA is like the chicken pox. So when you get a vaccination, it stops the chicken pox. So that's the key when you're dealing with this. If the RNA fools it, that's why when you heard these stories, and I told people back in February, it's not going to be the same. They said, well, you're not going to have the sniffles. It's not going to mimic. RNA, it's a very tricky, is what it does. It mimics the cells. It actually duplicates it or binds to another cell. So in other words, when this affects the upper respiratory, some of you back for years probably, oh my God, I got a cold, I got a flu, I've got pneumonia. When they start doing these testing, what they call blood serum tests, it checks for what they call antibodies. Now, if they know the actual type of antibody that's in it, or what the structure of the cell is, they will know. Let me give you an example. Since 1960, there's probably been about 7 or 8 different types of what they call corona strands. Now, like I said, the corona strand, see all those? They all have those little cones sticking up. One is the flu, one is COVID-19, and one is SARS, and one is MERS. They're all the same. The difference is there's a little bit of structure inside the cells that's going to change. So then you have people come, these pharmaceutical companies come up with this idea they're going to build a vaccination. Well, let me explain something with vaccinations in coronaviruses. They're not going to work. I mean, as far as I know, there is no vaccination out there. And the reason is because this virus actually, it can mutate, but it more binds to another, let's say, virus, such as a cold or flu. So that's where because it's an RNA single strand, it will attract. That's my experience. That's my opinion. I'm not a volcanologist. I just think logic and common sense. When I was in Minnesota, when I knew there was going to be issues with the so-called experts, they would talk about junk DNA on a cell. Let me explain something. There's no such thing as junk DNA on a cell. There's a function for everything. It just happens that function just happens to be, how would you say, it has multiple functions. If we were really an efficient system, each one strand of DNA would do a different function, but that's not how the reality is in this world. Then you go back and think how this viruses actually came about and were involved. Well, there's a lot of theory on it. Some of them came with, they link everything to bats, and that's probably pretty close. But here is kind of a little graphic of what they felt of how these viruses started. I know you can't see some of them on there, but if you look, most of it is from bats and mice. And what's ironic about bats and mice is they're everywhere in the world except the Antarctic and the Arctic. Bats have everything. And that's where you're going to find a lot of your viruses, mice. So I personally think that it's garbage. It's causing it's going to be linked to a lot of this. You have your politicians out there telling you that there's global warming and stuff like that. Well, let me tell you a little facts about life. Garbage is what generates and where viruses thrive. In order to get rid of this, what the federal government and what the states need to do is ban the dumping of raw garbage in landfills. They need to process them through what they call plasma generators. Burn these babies because viruses do not survive through heat. The next thing when you're dealing with viruses, you have these pharmaceutical companies come up with these, since flu is actually based on the coronavirus, they come up with what they call vaccinations. I'm going to tell you, there is never going to be a vaccination for a coronavirus, a SARS virus, or a MERS virus. The reason is you don't go after each one. You have to go after what they call the coronavirus, the whole species of that virus. Because if you don't, each one of those, you're going to come up with a vaccine, similar to what they do with the flu. They'll give you a vaccination for a strain of the flu. How's that worked? People still get the flu, people still die. That's just how these viruses are going to work. Now, the difference with this one is President Trump did something that no other politician ever did. He shut down the public. That was probably the best thing that has ever happened. Now, he started in I think it was January, and all these, the other one side of the political party, I guess you call them the Democrats or the liberals, they were crying, saying it was prejudice, racist, it shouldn't be done. Well, you may think President Trump, because he saved thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. Now he wants to open up. And to be honest with you, it's probably pretty close. I'm going to tell you right now from my experience, because I actually dealt with this similar type of virus in 2010 from a Dr. Yang. He came here from China. He was in the same province, actually the same town where this, what they call COVID-19 started. So I knew from what coronavirus was because I've dealt with it, like I said, back in the late 80s when I was doing research. So when you're dealing with viruses, and that's why when I got involved with as an herbalist, I know that when you research something, you have to understand the structure. the structure of what is in a cell. And that's basically how I work with my formulas, and that's why I have to know this stuff. And so I study and research it. Then I turn around and find the plants and work with them. But that'll be another time, another story. But in this case, I want you to know that this is one of those things. This virus has been around since the 60s, since it was first discovered or came to light. So there's a lot of you out there that's going to have this, what they call antibodies. I believe I caught them when I was in Minnesota. I to the point that I think I was actually in an emergency room in an oxygen. It was hard. When you were breathing, you kind of locked up and you kind of go into a seizure, is what I thought. And I was in there for probably about 10 days. I mean, it could have been something else, but they couldn't find out what the virus was. And since I was working with this, I kind of figured it was something like that. But the virus it's really contagious. And the reason it's contagious is because it's a single strand, and it's going to go into a lot of different species. And it will cross. It will go from animal to human, human to animal. When I really get concerned about viruses is when those babies start going into chickens. Chickens is a little different thing, and you can talk to. What we usually do when we do research is you put the virus or inject it into a chicken egg, or and that's where we, a lot of products, a lot of things are tested and raised through what they call the chicken yolks, collagen. So that's when I hear viruses getting into chickens, I get a little nervous. But my thing is, they tell you that there's going to be a cure, and I'm going to tell you right now, you can't cure a disease. It's impossible. There's no way. If you're going to cure it, then you would never have to worry about it. You're just exposed to a new virus, and that's when President Trump did this thing with the locking everything down was the best thing. I personally think by May 1st, they can actually start opening up. Give you an example of how this works. When we came from the New World, we came to America and we brought a thing called smallpox. We wiped out almost all the indigenous Native Americans because they did not have an immune system. That's the same concept. Same concepts like the Black Plague. A third of the world population died, a third of the world population caught it, and a third of the world didn't. Over the years, it has been made and got into our DNA structure. Now, we're going to a thing that's called the immune system. The reason you have problems with the immune system is because you have companies out there in their infinite wisdom trying to go develop what's called GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Now they're probably the most ignorant and scientists I've ever seen, because you cannot genetically modify something and not expect some repercussions. If you try something, usually always negative, because when they're working with GMOs, you're trying to breed some positive thing, like dogs. You know how they try and go out there and breed the best traits out, but then all of a sudden some other traits come in. Labs are an example. They turn around and bred what they call the better qualities of the dog, but then what came in was they were more susceptible to what they call hip dysplasia. So that's not how it works. Now, listen closely. If you're a scientist and you're a volcanologist and you're trying to do GMOs, it's not going to work. What you have to do is called evolution. And I know everybody says, well, it takes thousands of years for evolution. No, how evolution works is you change the environment. You can take a cell, like the coronavirus, changes its environment, and the immune system is going to build resistance. That's how you get your resistance. The human body is probably the most diverse thing out there. It will fight off more diseases than you can ever imagine. If there was a test out there that you could test every antibody and figure out what every disease is, we were exposed to a lot of stuff out there in a lot of areas. But anyway, back to this coronavirus. The worst is behind us. Now, you're going to have some stragglers. It might last till June, but you're going to get exposed. And I'm going to tell you another thing. The reason a lot of these people are coming down with it is they're going to find out, one, your immune system is compromised. Two, you smoke, you do something. You're either vaping, you're smoking dope, or you're smoking cigarettes. You're taking something into your lung, which is compromising your bronchioles. Those bronchioles, once they're affected or irritated, I'm telling you right now, if you have a cold or anything like that, this coronavirus just goes in there with those little prongs, and it attaches, and then it starts I call it mimicking or attaching itself or adapting. And then what it does, and then it binds. So it binds to other viruses. So just cut your smoking, man. If you're going to do this vaping and stuff, I'm telling you right now, go get some health insurance or life insurance, because the chances are about 80-90% of you are going to get this, and it could be fatal. That's why you see younger people getting it. Just quit vaping. Just stop everything for a while. Take a break from it. What I'll do is I'll post a few more of these videos. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to contact me. Say a comment on this. I hope this does explain a little bit more about the virus. But as for the coronavirus, it has been around since the 60s. It's affected, infants, and we can overcome it. And I wouldn't be surprised 1 out of 3 of you out there have actually had the coronavirus at one time in your life. So stay safe. Just take the same precautions you would if it's actually a flu season. That's what I do. If I haven't had the flu in about 3 to 5 years, usually what I do is go out there and I catch it, because I want my immune system to build it. Because then there's another strain of the cold or the flu. One thing good about cold or flu, you lose weight. I mean, I lost 20 pounds when I catch it. Listen, stay safe. If you have questions, feel free to call. And as for the economics, I do believe that it's going to be safe to open up by May. And as for the stock market, get prepared. I think it's going to hit over 30,000 by August and September. Thank you.